Okay, so if we run into that again, I just got to close the tab and reinitialize it.
Well, we're a real
There
Mickey
we go.
Mouse operation.
I think we are good now. We should be. Let me.
Hooray! I
Oh, yeah,
see
yeah, 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 we're good.
things.
Okay, a little bit of
So,
technical difficulties there, but we're good to go now. All righty. Let me just do this real. Oh, geez, come on.
okay,
Yeah. Oh, most
finally.
important thing here. Let's. There we go. Now we're live.
All right. Welcome to Kitchen Sink Live.
Oops. Let me close that. Yeah.
We uh we had a little technical difficulty, but not as bad as last week when it didn't work at all. And we had no idea until like the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So so we uh we had a lightning strikes twice. Actually, I think it comes out this week. Um, but we
Yeah.
had a couple of good topics on that one, and we thought we'd try to meld them together. And that was,
Mhm.
the concept of dangerous playgrounds, like
Mhm.
not coddling your children, and the idea of does government necessarily have to be a monopoly? Could there be concurrent government competing with one another within one jurisdiction?
Yeah.
And those two ideas could actually kind of blend, I think.
Well, in that lightning strikes twice, they sort of did blend a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but of
Well, off the
course,
top of
as
my head,
usual.
like, I mean, it's kind of playing with fire to try a whole system like competing governments, which, I mean,
Mhm.
you could argue that that was like the Civil War, right? But
Sort of.
it kind of wasn't because like it was more like two separate countries vying for control of the whole thing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it,
Exactly.
this would be a little bit more like I don't want to say complimentary, but it would be competitive, but it would also be like I don't know, like a common goal. Like everybody wants the best for everybody, and it would just kind of be like a big playing field where you could choose which kind of government assistance, if any, that you would want.
Well,
I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
could see it being sort of a friendly competition.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I feel like something like that is almost necessary because the government really doesn't have any incentive to do good for its constituents because
No.
they have
Well,
all this corruption that gives them all the goodies. So,
well, there's a whole lot of corruption, and also they whether they succeed or fail or do a good job or not, the tax revenue still rolls in.
right.
You know,
That is a little frustrating that there's no way for us to be like, you know what, fuck you.
I know. Well,
Not
and this is
not
the
paying
thing.
taxes, you know?
Like in the US and many other places, it's like a representative system. So you vote for particular representatives who theoretically are supposed to, represent their constituents. But oftentimes they behave completely on their own, usually
Yeah.
involving supporting government interests or corporate interests, like big corporate interests and things, which they're kind of intertwined in many ways. And there's been studies on that too that show that it's like politicians, yeah, legislators hardly ever do anything that their constituents want. Mostly they do other stuff. And so what do you
Yeah.
do about that? Vote in another narcissist or sociopath that'll do basically the same thing? No, and that's the frustrating thing for me. It's like, I'm compelled to pay taxes. Like you can't not do it and last very long, essentially. Um,
Yeah.
and and so like either you're going to get imprisoned or have all your shit taken away or whatever, something like that. Um, and but yet I don't really actually have any say in all this legislative in these processes, even within my own state in Washington. You know, there's it the largest like the volume of the state uh is it, let's see, has one school of thought about governance, and then the smaller metropolitan areas have a different school of thought, but there's more people packed into those spaces, so they overrule 100% of the time the majority of the volume of the state, like Eastern Washington versus Western Washington. They're completely different cultures, basically, with totally different needs. And yet it's like, yeah, I can wish all I want, I can vote all I want. It's not going to change a thing. I'm always outnumbered. And
Yeah.
it's very frustrating. And of course, they just recently in the state, there was this legislative session down in Olympia, and they added like 17 new taxes just in over the course of a couple of days or something. It's like, can we
Washington is
stop?
very tax happy.
Yeah. It's like, can we stop with the damn taxes already? Like, you guys, their revenue has continued to go up, and yet they're saying we don't have enough money. It's like, hey, do what I have to do, damn it, budget.
Right?
Like, learn to budget. You absolutely have enough money. Come on. And that's what that's going back into the monopoly side of things. It's like there is no alternative. Like,
Right.
if I'm tired of waiting in line at the DOT to pay my tabs or transfer a title or something, and the wait times get longer and longer, and the service gets suckier and suckier, but the price keeps going up, and there's no other DOT to go to. Like,
Yeah.
but there should be, because honestly, I think it's in everybody's best interest that there be competition, because it, like, you can't just rest on your laurels and be like, well, we're big daddy government, we can just whatever, we'll just do whatever we want to do. I mean, look at the website, any government website, for the most part, it looks like it's still the early 2000s, you know. Like, they haven't caught up with the times. Only barely have I seen certain things improve, but it's like, it's almost like they did it begrudgingly, not because they were trying to keep up with the times. and
Yeah.
and of course we all know the certain, like, what was the ACA website fiasco that happened, like the marketplace or whatever. They had not planned on the number of people, and the whole thing just crashed.
Oh.
It's like, how is Amazon able to do that, or YouTube
Right.
or something? YouTube can have, like, 500,000 concurrent live streams going on. Somehow they manage that. Yet this big, huge, expensive website that's government run, that just falls apart with a little gust of wind.
Nah, yeah, like back in the day, something like concurrent governments wouldn't really have been practical, but with technology now, like I feel like there's no excuse not to try something like that because it's
Mhm.
totally possible.
Yeah, I agree.
I
Absolutely.
mean, here in Germany, like my Ausweis, my identification card, right? It's got like a chip, and I can just scan it with my phone and do a bunch of like government things on an app, like super easy. So if I just had like a government ID from whichever government I chose to participate in, I would
Mhm.
be able to operate within that system
Well,
completely easy.
you
Like,
could say there's several examples of things like that. I mean, to some extent, you have that within the medical insurance
uh-huh. Yeah.
industry, that you don't have one big insurance company that runs the entire country. There's multiple insurance companies. And granted, they don't necessarily always have to compete with each other. They kind of monopolize certain regions or quadrants of the medical industry. But you do have that. You can say, you know what? I'm tired of this company. They suck. I'm going to try this other company, and that kind of thing. So you do have the option, and
Yeah.
somehow it coexists within a region. Doesn't have, there's not like any big problem or anything. The exceptions to things like that, I suppose, would be certain kinds of utilities, which would be difficult to
Right.
subdivide.
Yeah, like electricity, gas, water, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like there's
sewer.
pipelines that are in existence, and
Hmm.
you can't really like parse out molecules of water from one another, of course.
Yeah,
So like, yeah,
exactly.
like
Now, one could say perhaps you could do something like the rail system, where lots of different companies run on rails, and there's a lot of private rail ownership, like the actual rails itself.
uh-huh.
And so you pretty much like lease the time, pay
Hmm.
for to run your trains through there, just like you do if you go through the Panama Canal, you know.
Well,
Um,
okay, yeah,
and
yeah. So like any apparatus on your private property, cable companies do this even.
yeah,
Like the cable coming off of, the government owned poles to your
mhm.
house is owned by Comcast or
Yeah,
whoever.
yeah, exactly. Like the your city or whatever owns the
Hmm.
poles and maybe manages the land where the poles or where the cabling runs, but you can
Yeah,
put a bunch of stuff. So like multiple different things, like phone lines, power, all kinds of different things. Um, and maybe we could do something like that, where companies could pay to utilize the infrastructure, but also provide their own independent service that's using that, like,
yeah,
you know Amtrak or something versus another passenger train system running on the same rails. They could be a totally different experience.
right.
And so I could see that might actually work. Roads too, you could. I would see. I'm kind of a advocate for private roads, and people say, oh my god, but it would be toll roads. Well, there are roads, and we're already being tolled, you know like in the form of all these taxes and stuff, like the gas tax and your tabs and all this stuff. And look at the state of roads, like in the US, in many places they're terrible, yet the price keeps going up. Like, okay, well, maybe why don't we at least try it in some scale? Like maybe a certain area we should just privatize roads and have, like a company could own a road and maintain it, and then they're allowed to put their advertising on it. Like, oh, this is the Comcast highway or something, right? But there could be several competing ones where if they start sucking, you go over to the other one where they're like, oh man, this road is smooth as glass. Traffic is never a problem. And it's like, yeah, maybe it's $1 more for my trip down there, but it's fast. Like that would be good. And I don't know. So, and it's like, there's a lot of things that don't necessarily have to be monopolized by government, I believe. And because there
Yeah.
are alternatives to it. And maybe
The
it
only
would.
the only thing I see wrong with that is like the how would the jurisdiction of laws regarding the road function on a system like that? Like
that, that's where.
private roads now is kind of like a gray area. Like, does right of way follow the same rules in a parking lot as it does out on the street?
Yeah, that is, you're right in that, enforcement and having a shared set of rules is important. Because you don't want to go somewhere else and like the rules are all of a sudden,
Right.
we're driving like like they do in the UK in one city, but then it's, no, we need to have standards. And that would be where a government agency of some sort, a regulatory agency, it could even be
Mm,
private, but even if it's just a public agency, all it does is basically make sure that everybody's kind of adhering to fundamental principles of road management and enforcement and things like that.
yeah.
Um, and there's technological solutions for a lot of things too that haven't been explored because, well, they never needed to explore it. There,
That is one complicated facet of the idea of um, concurrent governments is the idea of legislation. Now,
mm-hmm.
I I feel like it would behoove everyone to simplify legislation a
Yes.
lot,
Yeah. Oh,
and
well, like
and of
like I've.
course that would kind of be necessary in a situation like that. But I
Mm,
feel like it would still have to be somewhat standardized or agreed upon
yeah.
by all the parties involved.
Including the public as well.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be a component that's present in all
Hmm.
legislation,
Hmm.
because all too often, legislators will do something that's really not popular, And well, what are you going to do? There's nothing you could do. They're the one that got voted in, and they're doing what they're going to do, And so there's really no alternative to that in that regard. Um, I
Well,
yeah, well,
I
see, and maybe
I
maybe
had a
you could.
shower thought today though that
Mhm.
there might actually be an alternative.
Okay.
So rather than like competing governments, um, maybe structure our society like remember Sim City? There was
Mhm.
like three categories of building, right? Residential, commercial, and industrial.
Yeah.
Well, what if you looked at it more like residential, business, and government,
Mhm.
like a three-way conversation?
Yeah.
Like the constituents own a third of everything, the businesses are a separate entity altogether
Mhm.
that have a say, and like they operate all the operations,
Mhm.
and then the government handles just like overseeing stuff, law and blah blah blah,
Mhm.
and regulating the government to make sure things are fair, and the people are regulating the government to make sure that they're not being corrupted by the business, and it could be kind of like a three-way, like majority would never really be a problem because like the people would always be kind of the tie-breaking element, right?
Well, and everything would be, it would end up balancing out because you couldn't, it's not like two halves and that's it. When you have two
Mm-hmm.
third, you have three third of something, then yeah, I think that would
Exactly.
balance. And they're being not like, say, because when you're talking just politics, raw politics, you have political parties, right?
Yeah.
Instead of this, you wouldn't have political parties per se. You'd have the general public, and then like
Mm-hmm.
you said, the business world, and then you'd have the regulatory world. and
Yeah.
and I think that would be maybe not ideal, but it would be a vast improvement over what we have right now.
Yeah.
And that would, because I think it would allow more personal interaction with things. Like you'd feel like, oh, your voice is actually heard, and you could
Yeah.
whether you be an individual or whether you be a community or whether you be a business or something like that. Because like a lot of times the state will do stupid things that harm certain kinds of businesses, like bars or restaurants or whatever. And they're all kind of, they have this kind of group where it's like, oh yeah, the restaurant owners of Washington State or whatever, and they could be like, put a little muscle in and be like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, that sounds like a good idea, but look what it's going to do to our businesses. And everybody uses these. You like going to the bar, right? you know, Imagine if we just closed. You know,
Well,
like,
and imagine a situation like where where society was structured that way,
mhm,
with like everything being this trifecta, right? You
yeah,
wouldn't even need a stock market. You wouldn't even need income tax. Like you could actually implement a system like the fair tax, but
mhm,
make it even more fair to the point where you put kind of like a ceiling on like what can even be taxed. Like anything below a certain dollar level should be completely tax free, whether it's new or used, so
mhm,
that you're not hurting the middle class and the low class people.
mhm,
Like it's just big ticket items go into this big pool of tax
mhm.
money because everything's run more efficiently in that situation.
Well,
You wouldn't need that much
and
revenue for the government,
and
like
that's where having a small scope governance would be beneficial in that regard if its entire purpose was basically to manage what's going on and make sure everybody is playing fair and
mhm,
following the basic rules and whatnot, and be a dispute resolution, of course, like some kind of court style system where like, okay, hey, either the people are going up against this company or vice versa, or two companies having a disagreement or whatever. Like, yeah, you need a kind of a third party, mostly independent dispute resolution system, and that I
mhm,
could see as being pretty valuable. Some kind of arbitration or whatever where you can go to and it's impartial or as impartial as possible. And but
mhm.
it doesn't have its feet aren't so big. It just kind of basic stuff, and it's all kind of managed by, like, if you want to change something with the governance system, it could be like any of these like industry organizations like the IEC, where they have these conferences on occasion where everybody gets together and they kind of talk about things, and you have industry professionals, and then you have the general public, and everybody sort of puts their 2 cents in, and maybe you kind of figure out, you agree on a standard, right? Like maybe speed limits could possibly, you could increase speed limits in a lot of areas, and like, okay, well, maybe the highways should have 70-mile-an-hour speed limits or whatever, or maybe that's too fast and everybody's like, it's too fast, we better slow
Yeah.
it down. Like at least you'd have a more, I think, efficient and intimate way of keep doing that, of making changes, and being
Mm.
efficient with your changes, because you know how slow government is to act on a lot of things. Well, they're really fast to act on certain things that we probably don't want them to do, but they drag their feet on stuff that's like actually kind of important, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, and to pull in the idea of the dangerous playground here, it's like the, the playgrounds we grew up with were way more fun
Yes.
because there was the element of danger, yes, but like
Mm-hmm.
if you were, I don't know, evolved enough to not be a complete idiot,
Mm-hmm.
it was just fun rather than dangerous.
Well,
And
yeah.
so, like, if you open the world up to take a risk here and there,
Mm-hmm.
you might find better ways of doing things. Um,
Absolutely. Well, and I think you get a better, well-rounded upbringing too, where you kind of are prepared. Like these playground experiences prepare you for the real world, where there are
yeah,
actual risks,
yeah,
and there is nothing to fall back on. Like,
like
because I remember many times growing up, when I was little, say elementary school, several times kids fell off the monkey bars and broke an arm,
mhm,
and they're like,
yeah,
screaming and stuff, and everybody's standing around like wide-eyed looking at that and like, oh shit, you know. And that kind
everyone
of,
learned a lesson.
yeah, that would stick with you. Or a friend of mine that got whacked by a car because he wasn't looking, and you, that's like, wow, damn. Now
Yeah,
everybody in that class is like, whoa, they're like vigilant looking and double checking each other and stuff. And
yeah,
because it's like, yeah, occasionally some bad thing happens, but it benefits everybody, because it becomes a lasting remembrance of like what happens when you get stupid.
yeah. And you
Plus
don't even
also,
necessarily have to witness the bad thing; you can just hear about it.
oh yeah,
So
yeah, you hear about it all, yeah, everybody talks. And of
yeah,
course they embellish to make it even, like, oh man, did you hear about Johnny? He fell off the monkey bars and broke not only his arm, but like his neck, and his skull cracked open and his brain was leaking out. Like, you know how it goes. And you're like, whoa, damn. And but then also, as a like a secondary benefit of that too, is that engineering improves. So
mhm,
engineers are building all these, playground equipment and stuff, and maybe they think, oh yeah, I guess this is safe. We tested it and it seems all right. But of course, kids, they'll find a way
right.
to to be
Well,
stupid.
like the 30-foot tall slides that we used to have.
Mm-hmm.
Like some kid fell off it and they took them all away rather than just making like, I don't know, like walls on the side of the slide and a little
Mm-hmm.
cage on the ladder or something.
Yeah,
So
but
like, oh, if you slip, you won't necessarily fall to your death, you know?
yeah, well, and that's why, because that's how engineering works. That's why flying is so safe right now,
Mm,
is because of all the crashes and accidents and failures of planes in the past. And playground equipment is no different. Engineers are going to look at that and be like, oh shit, okay, well, that is a problem.
yeah.
Like you said, we better add higher walls to it, or maybe change the slope of it, or
Or
whatever.
stairs instead of a ladder.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And come up with different, it's small incremental improvements, and eventually
Mm,
playgrounds. And of course, the substrate, the stuff they put down, it used to be wood chips, which, like, I don't know if you ever fallen off of something like the monkey bars into the wood chips, but I'll tell you, it hurts. Like, it is not a soft landing, and then they're all sharp and they just gouge your skin apart. And now they have like this rubber stuff that's much softer. In fact, there's
mhm.
like several ones. There's like rubber pads, that are made from old tire, like tire reprocessed tires or something. And there's also these chunks of rubber. So like it's like a ball pit. You just kind of softly land in it. And see
Hmm.
that that's a product of engineering, of learning from mistakes and failures of the past. And
Yeah.
and that, I think that that's important, but I think it shouldn't be too safe. There should always be a small element of danger in there because that's what makes it fun. You know,
Right.
like, okay, think about it this way. Skydiving, right? So we have VR headsets and stuff now that will give you a very lifelike skydiving experience, and you could simulate that, right? But is that really fun compared to actually going up in a plane and standing there on the edge of the door and like, well, and you just jump and like now you're free falling and you hope your parachute works and like that. That's a real danger right there, and
Yeah.
that's what makes it fun. I mean, that's fuck. There's adrenaline junkies that live for that stuff,
Yeah.
and
Well,
but like we shouldn't make things so safe that like it's no longer fun. I think there's a story. I can't remember the name of the story, but the band Rush made a song called Red Barchetta that's based around this story of how it's sort of this kind of tale of the future where cars got super safe and were like they were no fun anymore. So people would take these old dangerous roadsters out and sneakily drive around and stuff. And it's like because that yeah, that's not living. If you live in a bubble and nothing
hmm.
can ever harm you, that's not living. And I think that's important. And like it's important for development of young kids to be in those situations, to be unattended from time to time, so they're kind of on their own and and have to learn how to be independent essentially.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, shit. Back in the day, like when farming, agriculture was a huge thing, little kids, like 9 years old, they'd be taking the animals out to graze all by themselves, carrying like a rifle in case there were wolves or something that came and attacked. And it's like that they were able to do that and grow up to be perfectly normal people. Granted, a lot of people did die, but then of course they died for a lot of different reasons, and we've solved a lot of those potential problems now.
You
Uh,
have died of dysentery.
yeah, exactly. yeah, yeah. But and that's the thing. It's like people underestimate how independent children can be, and if you just let them learn how to be independent and how to recognize a threat or a risk and take precautions and you know still be able to have fun.
We
Uh,
we should make a game called like Oregon Trail Mix, and it's like it's about being like a hipster and like facing all these dangers. Like, oh no, you ate something that wasn't organic. Like,
oh yeah. And then, yeah,
you
you
have experienced a great amount of displeasure at your gut biota being like challenged.
mhm. Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
no.
exactly. Yeah, you eat a package or you make a like a veggie burger that you think is a veggie burger, but then the package turns around and it's just beef, and you're like, oh no. And then you're like, ah, trying to make yourself puke. That's that's your like recovery within the game.
I've been glutened.
yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Well, it's part of being a child, and it's also part of being an adult. Is exploring and like I one of the things I always loved when I was a kid, and I still do to this day, is just getting lost. Like
Yeah,
actually, I don't like it when there's a schedule and I have to be somewhere
right.
and like I'm lost. Like that sucks. But when you have free time to just wander
That's
and
how I figure out my way around. You know, like here in Germany, I frequently am like, you know what, I got a little time. I'm gonna
mhm,
see where this goes. You
yeah.
know,
Hmm.
and create maps in my head, you know, because I mean that's what I did growing up. Like,
Hmm.
you know, before GPS and stuff, like you had to figure out where you were. and how
Yeah.
to get to where you wanted to go. So you had to like wander around
Yeah.
aimlessly and figure out what roads lead to where.
Acclimate yourself to the region or the area. Yeah. And that's how I
Yeah.
learned a lot of shortcuts and stuff, just driving around
Mm-hmm.
aimlessly. But like that's one thing too. Again, the GPS is very beneficial, but it also kind of is a crutch that might,
Yeah.
if people use it, like let's say you started life with the existence of GPS, and that's all you ever did was use GPS to navigate. You don't form those mental pathways of how everything interconnects and learn, uh, you know, uh, uh, like any kind of like you don't get a visual sense of like, oh, this is where I turn, or yeah, now I'm driving by that church. That now I know that that's where that road goes or something. I'm that
Yeah.
kind of thing, and you don't have any kind of markers learned because you're just looking at the screen and listening to the voice prompts and probably just losing yourself in music or a podcast or something. And hopefully the podcast is kitchen sink microscopy. Um,
Yeah.
but and that I think is not good because I think we still need to have a sense of at least how to do that. The kind of like, yeah, calculators are really awesome, but you should also still have the some sort of fundamental understanding of how to do basic math on paper and things
Yeah.
like that, or in your head or whatever. Because that it's sort of like how a lot of countries, in China in particular, they start their kids in math class learning the abacus, and that is really useful because actually as they get better at it, these kids, they don't even need an abacus anymore. They can do it in their head. Like they visualize an abacus, so it's like a mental calculator. And in competitions, a lot of these kids have beaten people who use calculators. And it's like, okay, well, that's a super useful tool because you don't have your battery's not going to die, or it's not, the keys aren't going to break or whatever. You always have that. And also it gives you sort of a really interesting connection with how mathematics works that you don't really get when it's just on a screen on a calculator or on a computer or a phone or whatever. And that's
Yeah.
also where like AI I think could be bad. We talk about AI a lot, and because it could cause us to lose a part of us that's kind of actually, I think, something worth preserving, like part of
Yeah.
human nature. And yeah.
Well, hmm. We've talked about this before in the, you know, apropos AI and governments competing.
Hmm.
The idea of AI being the government
Yeah.
could actually be kind of a, I don't know, like a beta test as how a competing government operation would go. Like
Yeah.
allow, uh, an open source AI
Hmm.
government to operate on the side and just
Yeah.
see what happens.
Well,
Um,
and yeah, I agree, and that would be difficult to implement, not uh, as just simply implementing it, but it'd be difficult to get some kind of leniency or authorization to implement it because the
yeah.
government doesn't like competition. Those politicians and all the
Well, all you have to
corporatic
do is
bigwigs.
just write yourself or have AI write itself a constitution and just
Yeah,
declare itself
yeah.
the government. And
Well, you
what
could.
what are they going to do? Go to war with AI? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
like
Well,
that's actually like a really good idea. Like,
mm-hmm.
what would they do? Who would they go drop a bomb on? Like
Oh,
the
that's a good.
server? Which
Yeah,
server? Like
yeah. I know.
it's
Well,
open
and
source, right? Like,
maybe I think it's something that does need to be tried on some relatively decent scale.
yeah,
Say like maybe a city of reasonable size, like something I'd say like Tacoma or Olympia or something around here. I'm just thinking of like not Seattle. That fuck that. Um, they can sink into the ocean for all I care. Um, sorry for all the
well,
Seattleites
I
out there,
mean, I
but
mean, like your example though, like a state,
mm-hmm.
whether it's Tennessee, where yeah, the big cities are blue, but most of the people are red,
Yeah.
versus Washington, where the big cities are blue, but most of the people are also blue. So the
Mhm.
red parts of the state don't really get say.
Yeah.
Like maybe a whole state would be actually a good place to do the first experiment for something
That
like that.
that's where there's some sort of differing things, because that would give you an idea of like how can this be compatible with several different ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I'm thinking, because when it comes to following like the scientific method and making this a relatively scientific slash engineering type project, I think you got to start with a small model, right? Anytime you're building something, model it, do that kind of thing before building like a bigger version of it. Um, and so maybe there should be just a test case of an area that maybe does have kind of a little bit of diversity in it, and
Yeah.
do it through an initiative process, right? So they can vote to basically be this test case and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that would be, but and if it works, well, then certainly it could be expanded and applied to other areas, and maybe even you might see whole states look at that as a model and be like, wow, yeah, why don't we do that and just go ahead and do it? Because it's like, wow, that's working so well. Everybody's happy. Everybody's doing financially really well. It's really stable. Like that's it's a good thing. And that's the problem is like you can have these theoretical ideas, but it's like it's really hard to be able to implement and try them because of the
Yeah.
resistance. So the system is resistant to that because they may have even entertained some of these ideas in the past and role played it out, and found like, oh, yeah, that would actually work really well. And then we're out of a job, you know? So they're like, keep this, shh, we can't let this happen.
I mean, why couldn't you just role play something like that and maybe fake it till you make it? Like, I wonder if just saying like, "Hey, here's a fun little thought experiment. Here's a
Ooh,
competing AI government.
I,
When you vote, just vote here too, and
mhm.
see what happens." Like,
I have an idea. That's actually a very great idea there. A simulation, but make it a
mhm,
game, a
mhm.
global game, or maybe
Would you
whatever.
like to play a game?
Yeah. And and yes, global thermonuclear war. That sounds good. How about that one? How about a nice game of chess? um, no, so if it was a game, like a online game, like a lot of like any other game, basically multiplayer sort of thing that's running live, and you can just participate in it, and it's modeled after this concept, and just see how stable it is, because the thing is you can mirror real world things,
Yeah.
that behaviors of things in the real world, but instead of modeling the behaviors of the players, you have real players who actually have an interest and an incentive, and they have their own motivations, because it's like, you the score in the game or points or whatever, loot or something, or just cred, right? Like just being on top or something like that. And so that way you could really test that to see if it would apply in some way to the real world. That would be easy, and it would be cheap, and wouldn't step on anybody's toes, uh, but just see how things unfold in that regard. Now, one problem too, though, is the effect of virtualizing things, and that, because like how people online don't behave the same way people in real life do.
Right.
Generally, like you'll get, especially with anonymity, trolls. People do that just for the lulls. They do it for fun, and there's tons of them. And then you have people behave differently. People will be a lot more mean online than they would in real life. So you might end up with some really strange effects.
I
So
I
I don't
mean
know how you.
that's thinking in terms of like a social media aspect though. Like if you had a system that wasn't like interactive with others, it was
Mhm.
just interactive with the government, like pretty much like the government operates now, apart from the occasional town hall or something. Like
Mhm.
you don't really collaborate on how you interact with the government, you know?
Well, one thing too, it's like you could make it so that there are consequences that mirror the real world for bad behavior.
Hmm.
Even if it's not like specifically illegal behavior, but just socially bad. Because like, yeah, if you were to do and say some of the things that people online do out in the streets, there would definitely be consequences for that. Uh, some of which might be getting your ass kicked, you know. And so that might be a way to keep that in check a little bit. And of course, like make it like well, of course, the consequences could be just like they are in the real world. It could be a financial consequence, like you might lose your job. Well, now your character's living on the street. What do you do now? You know.
Hmm.
But I think it would be good to simulate something like that, because that's the thing is there's a lot of unknowns that you only know when it actually takes place in practice. Um,
Right.
it's like you design some kind of machine, right? And you think, oh yeah, this should work perfectly until you build it, and you're like, ah, shit, nope, that doesn't work. And like, so it's better to scale models and like for instance the platform that I built, the rotating one for our intro.
Uh-huh.
I made a little tiny cardboard version of it just to kind of get the like gist of how that, even though it's really simple, but it's like, yeah, I didn't want to start cutting plywood and screwing things together before I had like an understanding of how the mechanics of it should work. And so yeah, and simulating things, I think that would be good. That'd be really
Yeah.
good. Because then you could at least have cite an example when you're trying to make an argument for trying this in practice in real life. You could be like, well, we've had this simulation running for 5 years with like 50,000 people in it in this virtual city, and
Yeah.
it's run fine. you know,
Yeah.
that'd be kind of
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if an AI model is sophisticated enough to, I don't know, kind of like extrapolate some data input and say like, what would this look like in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Just so that like you would at least have, however accurate, but at
Mm-hmm.
least some kind of idea of the direction that an experiment like that would go in
Mm-hmm.
reality.
Yeah, it
Um,
could certainly do that. Taking a smaller, an initial sample and watching the patterns unfold and be able to sort of calculate where that would be if they kept unfolding in those directions.
mhm.
Because generally, I think you'd find out real fast where the flaws are, even just
Well,
within the first like year of running a simulation like that.
that is one strength of AI that I've found with yeah, like before I really devoted my time to finishing up this album, I was working on that idea of integrity coin and
Mm-hmm.
this concept of creating an economy based more on good deeds rather than profit
Mm-hmm.
and I used quite a bit to bounce ideas off of, and it was really good at giving me like counter arguments and posing potential problems to
Mm-hmm.
which I could then respond to, and it would be like, oh, okay, well now that I rethink about it with what you've just elaborated on,
Mm-hmm.
it then started giving me like suggestions of its own.
Mm-hmm.
It was all like, oh hey, what if we do this and that? And then I was like, oh yeah, and what about this? And before
Mm-hmm.
long, like it was getting to be like a really sophisticated plan.
Yeah.
So doing something like that at the ground level and
Mm,
then implementing it on a larger scale with like actual people in a like a hot modular sort of
mm,
experiment. I don't know how you would phrase it, but
mm,
like like a real experiment with real people, and like not necessarily real results, but like uh,
mm,
a simulation in that regard with other people, and then see what happens there, and then kind of go back to the drawing board, and maybe with then a team of people that are like, hey, I kind of want to like contribute some ideas to this too,
yeah.
all like bringing their ideas to the table with AI, coming up with like a really good skeleton, and then just doing it.
Yeah.
Like
Well, and honestly,
make
this
it
is the
happen.
thing. One thing with doing real life operations, test things, is people are going to be resistant to that, to changing,
Mhm.
or fearful or hesitant for one reason or another. But running it as a game, like the what I was saying about creating an online game, um, you could easily test out other ideas by modifying some of the parameters of like the conditions, and see how that impacts the operation of the game.
Yeah.
uh, I mean,
Well,
it
especially if it was handled as not a not a competitor, at least initially, not as a competitor to government, but as a supplement to government. Like if there's a thing that government can't handle or can't handle quickly enough, let's
mhm.
say, then maybe it can be redirected to this AI model.
Well, yeah,
And
and the thing is, it wouldn't matter because it's a game, right? You
yeah,
could do whatever you want. The rules of the game are the rules of the game. That's the world in which, like there are games where the physics that is way different, and things like that. And so it would be a good place to kind of experiment with different ideas. And I mean, one thing too, it's like that, like I said, it's hard to, without a really really deep amount of knowledge and experience within a particular field, it's really, and even then it's very difficult to kind of pre-calculate what the outcome of something will be, like implementing some kind of change, because
mhm,
there's, in economics there's the seen and the unseen, and that kind of thing. So it's like it's really hard to know how all these parts are going to move together until they start moving, and then you could be like, all right, that either worked right, or it's better than I thought, or it's absolutely shit. And then at that point you can change the parameters, and honestly I think at this point you could almost have AI act as human players, especially if you essentially code into the AI bots kind of the same sort of drives that people have,
yeah,
like not necessarily emotions, but just that basically the same kind of drives and maybe similar behaviors, and then vary it up a little bit, just like the real world is. Like not everybody's exactly the same as everybody else. Not everybody has the same wants or desires, you know, and so have a blend of things and then just run it as a simulation and see what happens.
yeah,
That'd be kind of cool. That'd be even
hmm,
easier to implement,
yeah.
because that's the nice
That's
thing.
worth that's worth doing though, because like the way things are headed is just shit.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah. Well,
it can
and the thing is,
hardly get worse.
I know, and this is the thing. It's been shit for so long, and yeah, it just keeps getting shittier. And I think that's the thing is, everybody has this way or that way. Oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. It's like, no, you got to do actually kind of a lot of things. You kind of almost have to overhaul the the cultural um, standards or whatever, like people's expectations and that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
uh, and that's really hard to do. But if you have an example, right? If you've said, hey, I've run this simulation, well, like I said, AI too, running it through AI as AI players, when you're doing it with actual human beings playing a game, human beings have limited time and they act in real time, whereas an AI system can run on like a supercomputer where you could speed time up like 1,000 times faster. And so in the span of maybe an hour, you'd have years and years, decades, 100 years of simulation. And that's kind of handy because you don't want to
Yeah.
wait for an actual year to be able to make a change when something doesn't work out to see if that
Right.
change changes it.
Hmm. Yeah. I wonder if there's also a way that something like an AI government could be a more effective arbitrator
Yeah.
in how things move forward. Because I feel like people, like a common theme on this show is that people have the same goal
Hmm.
and they just disagree on how we get there. But like how we get there doesn't really matter as much as getting there. Like we spend way too much
Well,
time arguing over
well,
that.
what
And
what
it's like,
what people, I think the arguments have to do with like you can't we don't we can't snap our fingers and magically we are there. It's sort of
right.
like, oh well, we want to be exploring space. Okay, well that's fine, but you can't just be exploring space all of a sudden. You got to build up to that and figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of like again, there's a lot of unknowns in that you can't just make it happen and everything's peachy keen. Um,
Yeah.
so there has to be some sort of process to achieve that, and that's where the disagreements are. In that some people believe that this way will be effective, others believe that way will be effective, and nobody really knows because it really hasn't been tried, you know. Or maybe it's been tried in one way, but you know how it is. The systems like that are complex. Societal systems very complex. It isn't, and it isn't just a machine. It's just like a like an ant colony almost, or something like that, or a
Hmm.
beehive in a way. Um,
Well, I
and
wonder if AI could help in something like that too, where like we've also talked about this before, like a more a la carte system of tax,
yeah,
where like the things that matter to you, like you would feel much better about paying into a system where you have more say
mm-hmm.
in seeing the things that you want to see be achieved,
Mm-hmm.
be worked toward, so
And the key is like that it not be compulsory. That's because you have to be able
well,
to, if it's not working, you have to be able to vote with your wallet, basically, and
mhm,
have that, because otherwise, what's to stop people from continuing doing something that isn't working? So if you
yeah,
can
yeah.
back out of it and be like, whoa, whoa, hey, hold on a minute, and you get all your friends together, and you don't necessarily have to back out. You could simply say, look, there's 100,000 of us that are completely unhappy with this service. We're just going to stop paying into it. And then
Mhm.
that would encourage whoever's getting paid to change their mind. Maybe they like alter the way they're doing things and improve stuff.
But
So
some
it
kind
could
of
still
like,
be funded, but
but some kind of AI interface could help balance between um, like societal need and your will, and say like,
yeah.
okay, like I see you value these things,
Hmm.
but we should apply your money in this way because there are things that like we definitely need to divert some money to,
Hmm.
but like for the remainder of it, we can definitely funnel your money over here instead of to whatever you don't value so much, like,
Yeah.
so it would be more like half of the tax money goes to things it has to, and then the other half goes to things that you want it to, so that there's never really any deficit in the things that really matter, even if you
Mhm.
don't think they do.
Yeah,
Like
well,
there are things that
actually,
are objectively necessary, like energy and water and
yeah,
sewage and roads and
yeah, yeah, exactly.
whatever. But like,
Well, and one
maybe
thing that
some kind of
AI,
system like that could actually help create an a la carte
yeah,
system that
and
appeases people a little bit more.
well, because that's ultimately what the goal is, right? That
Hmm.
people have, safe and happy lives, essentially,
Yeah,
fulfilled, have, some kind of sense of
sense of
fulfillment.
purpose, and yeah,
Yeah. Well, here AI, I think an AI governance system could be actually useful in that, depending on how it's programmed and set up, it would be immune to the whims of the moment.
right.
Like they're like trends, right? Something is trendy for a day or a week or whatever. It wouldn't be affected by that. And maybe you could have some kind of a scoring system as far as like certain things. Like for instance, uh, defense, right?
Hmm.
You don't want AI to be like, oh well, no, we got to wait a while and see when we're being attacked, right?
Right.
That's like number one priority there, where it's like, yes, immediately we have to respond to this immediately, or a big huge fire breaks out and stuff, and like we got
Yeah.
to change some stuff because there's like fucking cities burning, or something like that.
Yeah.
Crisis
Yeah.
response, stuff like that. But then
Yeah.
a lot of things where it's like, yeah, it doesn't really matter if it happens right now or 10 years from now, as long as we get it right. That's
Well,
that's where,
this this is something I was thinking about recently, and I was going to do like a minute microscopy or maybe a lightning strikes twice topic on, and that's like there's a bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to equitable treatment and bureaucracy. Like you can't really have equitable treatment without bureaucracy. Like you
Mhm.
can't really, like assure that everyone is going to consider the needs of others without having regulation.
Mhm.
However, you can't really have equity because of bureaucracy
Yeah.
because you can't have nuance for human intuition or situational uh exceptions and stuff. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to do things by the book. I can't
Yeah.
help you
Yep. Yep.
because you're going through cancer or whatever, like.
No,
So
you're right.
it's that double-edged sword. It's like equity like can't exist with or without bureaucracy.
Pretty much. And that's some of those things. It's like, well, that it's very idealistic, I think, to think that it can be achieved 100%. That's not
Mhm.
possible, and we have to.
Right.
That's kind of what I always believe. It's like, well, there's gonna be some people that fall through the cracks or have something stupid happen, a mistake is made or whatever, but we want to try to aim for as close as possible to 100%.
Right.
um and
But
that's the tricky
bureaucracy
part.
is all about hardlining with 50%. So
Yeah. Well, and there's also in society, there's conflicting wants, desires, and needs that are kind of at odds with each other in some ways. And that's the really hard thing. Like, how would you balance somebody who wants all kinds of safety nets and oh, I want to make sure that everything's covered, right? Versus somebody who is just fiercely independent, and they're like, I don't want anybody, I just want to take my own risks and solve my own problems, and I don't want anybody breathing down my neck telling me what to do, that kind of thing. And that it's kind of hard to figure that one out.
yeah.
And that's where I think kind of what you're talking about with this a la carte system or competing governance, it's like you could theoretically have a society where both those sorts of sides are covered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, for instance, in Nevada, they might more, but Nevada, Texas, some other states, when you used to be able to get an allodial title for land, right? So around, see, in Washington State, right, you buy land and you pay property tax. You're kind of beholden to the whims of the county and stuff. Like if they want to put, like, a friend of mine, he lived in the county near Puyallup, the South Hill area, and like he, it was like they wanted to put in sewer, and he had a septic system.
Septic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they wanted to put in, the city wanted to, or the county wanted to run sewer, which basically he would be required by law to connect to and pay for. And he's like, I don't want to do that. So that's kind of the way things work in a lot of larger areas. But like when you have an allodial title, you don't pay any property tax. It's your land until basically you die, um, or sell it, and but you don't get any services. So you're kind of on your own.
Mm.
So it's like that's a, I think, a fair choice.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Yeah.
because if I wanted, let's say I owned the house that I live in, and I wanted to be like, you know what, I'm going to go off grid. I'm going to I'll have a composting toilet to take care of the black water. I'm going to set up my own filtration system, and I'll rain barrels and stuff like that. Or maybe I'll just pay for water to be taken into a tank, um, pay my own garbage. I'll go to the dump and pay for it 100%. Um, all the power is coming from my nuclear reactor or solar panel or wind generator. Like, and just say, okay, call up the utility company. Like, yeah, I'd like to disconnect everything. Um, you can't do that. I mean, if you don't pay, they'll disconnect it, but you
Right.
permanently sever ties with the city. And that, see, that is bad. I think we should allow for people to kind of do their own thing within reason.
And a competing government system would definitely open the door to that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah,
Well, and
like
especially, and I think it's
even
also,
with utilities, I think,
mm-hmm,
because yeah,
yeah,
like if it were just a matter of saying like I'm not gonna pay anybody to run the wire from the local pool
mm-hmm,
of wire or pipe to my
yeah,
house, then that's how it is, and you can just
yeah,
provide your own sorts of those things.
yeah, exactly. And we've never had it better as far as the ability to actually do that.
Right.
You know, like
Yeah.
there are so many options for power, for water treatment. Like again, in my sailboat, I have a composting toilet, and it just turns everything into dirt, and that dirt theoretically could be used for growing stuff. I don't know if I'd want to eat crops that grew in that, but ultimately it does just turn to dirt, very nutrient rich dirt. Um, and so yeah, you could do that and do it quite safely without any environmental. In fact, one could argue that if you composted your waste, it would be more environmentally friendly than what they do at the sewage treatment plant, and having all these sewer pipes running underground and stuff like that.
I
Um,
mean, the seen and the unseen
yeah,
exists in situations like that too, with like biological contamination
yeah,
and things like
yeah.
that.
And that's where
Um,
I said, like, if we were to do, if people did that, there should at least be some kind of like oversight, in that maybe you just get checked on, like, are you
yeah,
doing everything right? We'll do a test to make sure that your soil is not weird because your neighbor called and is like, I'm concerned about that stuff leaching in and that kind of
yeah,
thing. And there could be some kind of consequence, or maybe they give you a time to change it and fix it. And
yeah.
that
Yeah, I
could,
mean, that's the thing. Anytime anything you do can affect another person, like, yeah, yeah, I'm sorry if that bothers you, but like, tough
mhm.
shit. Like, you have to address
Well,
that. Like,
exactly, and that's something in my own personal philosophy of anarchism. That is a primary consideration. Is like, yeah,
mhm,
you should be able to live your life as you want. It's your body, your life, your property that you've built. Right, you built something with your own hands or whatever, or worked a whole bunch to save a bunch of money to buy something somebody else built. But as soon as you start encroaching on somebody else's ability to live their life as they see fit, in terms, also safety is a factor too, and like, then now that is a problem, and you're not allowed to do that. um and maybe there's arbitration. Maybe you say, well, yeah, I know my neighbor, you're pissed off about that tree, maybe I'll pay them a fee so we can keep the tree around, or something like that. Or come to some agreement. I don't know. There's always ways. but yeah, for sure, that's something to consider. And that like I was saying earlier on, um, I think it requires a cultural shift, um, uh, where people kind of take that to heart, and that's really necessary if you want to reduce the scope and scale of governance, um, and where it's like everybody, the community essentially just self manages. There's a lot of places around the world. I know Japan. Some of my friends have lived in Japan for years, and they said in a lot of places, like you could leave something, you could leave like a laptop in a train station and come back 2 hours later, and it's still there because
Yeah.
the culture is such that you wouldn't dare dishonor yourself by stealing. Some people still
It's
would, but very few.
it's actually like that here in Germany too. Like
Yeah, yeah.
um
Some places,
very often you see things just kind of like set to the side somewhere.
yeah.
Like my wife like lost her scarf one time,
Hmm.
and we retraced our steps and we went back to the pharmacy, and somebody had just kind of set it like on a wall somewhere, and it was still there,
Yeah.
like so
Well,
like
and
that's
some,
really cool.
yeah, and there are areas within the U.S. that are like that. They tend to be more rural, like the
Hmm.
rural areas. People tend to be a lot more friendly, and not, they wouldn't take something that's just sitting there. Maybe unless it was sitting there for a month or something, right? Like,
Well,
okay,
I'll
well,
tell you what's at the core of that is like people who don't need aren't enticed to steal or be bad people.
mhm,
Like, like when when you don't have to worry about where your next meal comes from, or anything like that, like there really is no incentive to do bad things.
mhm.
Yeah, like it just kind of comes naturally, like to animals, not even humans,
Well,
just
and maybe with exception like certain crimes of passion, right?
well, yeah, I
Everybody's
mean, like,
susceptible to that. But yeah, in general, you're right. And there's also a component of like urban culture where maybe that there's a shift there where people just behave differently. It's sort of just the way it is, and that's the way you were raised or something like that. um,
hmm.
and maybe some people feel entitled. It's like, well, hey, I'm just going to take this, you know
Yeah, I mean, okay,
whereas like,
so like if you drop $100 bill, that's
mm,
something fairly ubiquitous, like someone would probably be like, well, if I don't take it, someone else will, so I might as well take it. But if it's like
mm,
a personal item, like a scarf or a laptop that might have family photos or something on it,
yeah,
like that's different, like that's something where someone would be like, well, of course I could use a laptop, but like somebody is probably going to come looking for that. Maybe they
yeah,
really want it, and need it, and I'm going to
exactly.
leave it there, like that's the difference in society that I mean, it's like when you don't have a system where people are like constantly desperate for grabbing anything that could potentially like make their life a little bit better,
Yeah.
like
Well, no, you're right, and that's where I think a wealthy society is a healthy society. That like the less
yeah.
of that kind of struggle and strife that exists, the better off everybody's going to be. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you'll certainly see a lot less crime, although there's artificial crimes like drugs. So you could theoretically eliminate that and turn it into a regulated system instead of a like criminal system. And
Right.
instead, like if there's some kind of fee in addition to purchasing some of those things, it could go to organizations that help with treatment, because treatment is better than incarceration for
Well,
helping people.
Seattle's kind of transitioned into that, haven't they? Like
Kind of, except
in the last 10 years or so, like they're like
they
safe
have
zones or whatever.
yeah, but
And
they have, but the problem is that they've only half-assed it. Like they've done, like they decriminalized to some extent things, the carrying or usage of various substances, but they are very woefully prepared when it comes to actually helping people on the like
mm,
after the
mm,
fact. The treatment side of things sucks. But
Mm.
it generally sucks as it is because nobody's really, I don't know, they're not going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Because they're also looking at it not as like, they're looking at it as like a substance abuse problem just on its own, but most addiction is mental health related in some way. um, and that's, you got to have a multi-pronged uh, approach to dealing with that.
Yeah.
And I think also it just being illegal, because there's other issues too. Even if a city allows it, that doesn't mean that there can't be consequences like on a federal level. So it's still not as, and that's why you have gangs and stuff like that, and you have this crime, drug dealers, prostitution is also part of that too, though maybe
Yeah.
not quite as violent, um, but still it's exploitative. So, but if that were, again, if that
Yeah.
were not illegal, it would just be a business like any other. And that, what you don't really see massage parlors shooting each other, like the owners of massage
Right.
parlors, like shooting each other. They're just like, whatever, you know, it's no big
That
deal.
that's interesting. It is apparently legal here.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I've ever seen like a brothel, but I know they exist here
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and like in Amsterdam and stuff like that. Like, and so it's kind of interesting that like, you know, people would have you believe like, oh, if that were legal, it would just be
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. But it's
Oh yeah.
actually like less ubiquitous here than it is in the US.
I know. Well, one thing I remember when the push for marijuana legalization happened in Washington State, and all the PSAs that came out and all the panic, trying to spread
Mm.
panic basically, and it's fear mongering, saying like, oh my God, if it's legal, they're going to be, there's going to be thugs like smoking pot in front of your kids. They're going to be smoking pot everywhere. And it's like, yeah, well, that did kind of happen for like a couple of months right after that passed. It was a little bit of a party time where people are just
Mm.
smoking pot wildly. It went crazy, but now, eh, like you rarely see it, rarely, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's been like that for
I'll
a
admit
long time.
I was one of those people that expected that to happen and I did see it for a few years, maybe
Mm-hmm.
more than a few months, but like for a few years I would see it quite often and then it sort of dried up.
Yeah,
Um
yeah. And but I mean, the big celebration, that was like the first few months where everybody's fucking smoking pot everywhere, you know,
yeah,
and it was just a huge
yeah.
party. And then it kind of tapered off a little bit, and then maybe somebody walking down the sidewalk or sitting their car in a parking lot or something like that. But yeah, now you rarely see it at all, you know. Yet every pot
Yeah.
shop in the area is doing quite well, so people are still buying pot at least to the same level that they were before.
You know, it's funny, like that's another thing is it is now legal here in Germany, but I have never seen one pot shop. So I don't know if maybe the law is just handled a little differently.
Yeah, it probably
Um,
is. It may be a decriminalization sort of
and
circumstance.
well, and to be fair, like even in the US, well, even in Washington, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
um, once it was illegal, it took a couple years before pot shops were like kind of normal.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but that said, like here it's federally not illegal, and in the US it still is federally illegal. So
Mm-hmm.
like that
Yeah.
is one other major difference. So
Well, and that's
I don't
one
know.
thing too. Actually, that brings up a good point. Is like the governance thing, and it's like, because so now the states
It's very
do.
contradictory. Like
Yeah,
it's
the states
confusing.
do have the ability to basically say, yes, it's legal in this state. You can run a business selling it. And but the federal government side of things, they're saying, oh no, it's still illegal. And but since the federal government controls the banking system, so that's why you go into pot shops in Washington State, you have to pay cash because they
Right.
can't take credit card because the banks are not allowed
I
to.
think they're trying to find a way around that.
Yeah, that's being worked on. But see, that I'm saying that's one of the the key
Yeah.
problems there about like that conflict.
Well, and that's another thing that should be that trifecta is the banking system should be equally owned by the people who have bank accounts there,
Mm-hmm.
the bank themselves, and the government. Like three parts, you know. So like
Yeah.
the people are the tiebreaker,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, like we really don't need we don't need a stock market. I feel like we don't need a stock market, and we don't need tax the way we have it now. Like we really could just have like the people who can afford things paying the taxes, and that's it. And business can be operated like on a completely free market
Mm-hmm.
if it were just
Well, yeah.
handled
In
in
fact,
that way, you
one
know?
of the
Like,
things is like the reason why there's a stock market is because there's shares in corporations, and
mhm,
corporations are a construct of the government. If
yeah,
if that didn't exist, if you just opened a business and it was as big or small as you want to raise money to do something, you go to like venture capital companies or banks,
yeah,
you get
yeah,
loans, things that do like there you go. Um,
yeah. Your
and it would
business is as good as the merit behind the idea. Like,
yeah,
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 like
exactly.
that's how it should be.
Oh yeah, or
And Amazon
example
would
of
still be around because that's a fucking good idea, you know?
yeah,
Like,
exactly. I know. Yeah, and I would say when it comes to banking, the biggest involvement of government would it should only be like basically just making sure there's not any kind of fraud.
mhm,
That's really the thing. Because you
yeah,
can have a variety of banking systems and ideas, and really ultimately, when the government has its hands out of banking, the banks are run by the people because it's the people who deposit money and
right,
stuff and have a loan or whatever. They really control the bank.
yeah,
And but like keeping fraud down, and maybe I don't really have a problem with something like FDIC insurance. But it doesn't
yeah,
like banks shouldn't have to have that. But obviously, you wouldn't want to put a lot of money if you had a whole bunch of money. You wouldn't want to put it in a bank that didn't have insurance. Um,
right. Yeah, I
so
mean, like, I mean that even exists to this day. Like, there's
mhm,
Wise,
yeah,
which is kind of like an app
hmm
that offers like really good interest rates and really good conversion rates. So it's great for people like me that live in another country but have U.S. bank account and citizenship and blah blah blah.
yeah,
And but it's not FDIC insured. It's
hmm
insured up to a certain amount,
yeah.
but it's not exactly a bank. So
And that's
do I
that's
keep a lot of money there? No,
yeah, that's
but you know,
that was my
like
point. Yeah, you could obviously, yeah, if you had $100,000 in an insured bank, but you wanted to use this service, you might probably only put like a couple grand in there because you could afford to
yeah,
lose that if it went belly up, but you wouldn't want to
right.
lose all of that money it,
Mm-hmm.
if it did. So that yeah, you'd have an incentive to put your money in a trust, like you want a stable, trustworthy place to put your money bin essentially. Um,
Yeah.
and but then for experimenting or maybe taking a risk on something to
Or
maybe
take advantage
potentially
of the good,
yeah,
interest rate and
yeah,
so
yeah,
on. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so maybe it provides something like a benefit, like you said, the exchange rates and stuff like that. It's like yeah,
Yeah.
that's what you do for your day to day, but your long term is in a safe place. um yeah, and it doesn't even have to be the government, but I mean there could be some kind of governing system that just because it's like that. My whole thought is like you want to just make sure everybody's playing fair. That's really the point. That's all that we really need is to make sure that everybody's there's no fraud, no like outright criminal stuff that's obviously bad, no theft, like company promising no Ponzi schemes, that kind of thing. um and but other than that, eh, doesn't need government doesn't need to be involved in any of that stuff. It'll control itself as long as you have a free market and you have competition. There you go.
Yeah.
It'll keep these companies in check. And here's the thing: like the biggest problem with corporations isn't the stock market; it's the shareholders. The
Hmm.
shareholders demanding. ever increasing profits, and everybody that's in the company are beholden to that. Like the CEO
Yeah.
has to ensure that the company is making more and more profit for the
Right.
shareholders. And
And the
that's how,
government reinforces that.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And in fact, I think it might be law, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so what ends up happening is companies are no longer like a personal thing where it's like, oh, they're regular people, and they actually care. And maybe they just want the business to be a
Yeah.
good business. And but no, now it's like, oh yeah, we have to follow these people who hold everything,
Right.
you
You want
know.
to talk about a Ponzi scheme? The whole idea that profit is like an assured thing
Yeah, that makes
is
no
like
sense.
how yeah, like just do the fucking math. Like how does that work?
Well, you can't, and the thing is, you can't predict the future. Like
Right.
you could, the shareholders can demand profit all they want, but if some unforeseen change happens in the market or whatever in the environment that the
Mm-hmm.
markets operate in, well, you might be in the red, and then what? You know, oh, they
Yeah.
fire the CEO and get another one in. But see, that's the problem. That's what you end up with, is you end up with like shitty products and services, cost cutting measures, like things that don't really improve.
Shrinkflation.
Yeah, because the motivation is to make a profit because they have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of CEOs and executives and companies and people under them do their best to try to keep the product as good as possible. But I mean, there is a threshold where it's like, well, we got to lay some people off. We got to change the product to be smaller or something. Raise the price, whatever they got to do. Um, and that just sucks. I don't see that
Yeah.
as a benefit to society. That's a detriment. It's
Well,
not good.
yeah. Like if a company is treating the people that make the company work shitty
Mm-hmm.
just so that they can treat the people that pay money into it
Mm-hmm.
and do nothing else but have money,
Mm-hmm.
like like that that doesn't work. Like
No, no.
that's not
Well,
fair. That's not
and
logical.
the
That's
thing is,
nothing.
the stock market is arbitrary too. So, like,
Hmm.
it isn't like
It
if
is
I got a loan.
gambling.
Well, that
It's
sort of,
predictable gambling, but it's like
yeah.
you really can't know for sure. Like
It's it's
you can
on
totally lose your ass,
it's on the
and
same island as gambling, yes.
yeah,
But the point is like that. Oh, where was I? It's oh Jesus, shit, I lost my train of thought there about the stock market. It shit.
treating people shitty and
No, well, for one, the executives and CEO and stuff have to abide by
yeah.
the shareholders' interest. Oh no, stock
Hmm.
market's arbitrary. That's what I was pointing out. That like, so if I'm a company, right, and I'm a small company, but I want to expand and open some new locations, I can decide who I get a loan from,
Hmm.
and it may be a small organization, it may be a venture capital company, it could be a bank, it could be a little bank, a big bank, whatever, and I can choose who I go to for a loan, and they can also choose to give me a loan or not, that kind of thing. Whereas with the stock market, you simply buy shares in a company. If there's shares for sale, you can buy them, and if you
Yeah.
become, if you have enough of them, now you're one of those dictators that can tell the company what to do. And
Oh, I do
so,
that. I do that.
yeah, yeah.
Now that I've got a little money, like I buy stock in corporations that I don't like,
Mm-hmm.
and then like every quarter or so, I'll dump it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been a shareholder long enough that I get to vote
Mm-hmm.
on whether or not
Mm-hmm.
they get pay raises and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
stuff like that. I'm like,
Yeah,
nope, 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 nope.
but see, it shouldn't be that way. That's the thing.
Right.
That
Yeah.
system ought not to exist. I think it's
Hmm.
not free market.
Hmm.
It's like a controlled market essentially, and
Yeah.
free markets work really well. They
And
generally benefit everybody, but we don't have a free
and
market
that's why I
anywhere
do what
really.
I do. Like I'm sabotaging the shit out of that because
Yeah,
it's bullshit. Like
it is. Well, and that's where,
anything I can do to upset a bullshit system, I
mhm,
will do. And it's
yeah,
perfectly legal because I'm just voting.
yeah,
Like I have the right to do that because I owned the stock at a certain
exactly.
time.
Yeah,
I can vote however the fuck I want. So fuck
exactly.
you.
Well, you could encourage, in fact, actually, if there were enough people doing that, it might
Mm-hmm.
become untenable to operate companies
Yeah.
that way anymore. And so companies might be like, you know what? Nah,
Yeah.
we're not going to go public. It's too much of a pain in the ass. You
Right.
know?
And that's why I'm happily explaining what I do because it's legal and people should do it because
And it's fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I would say there's another alternative too, and that is maybe, again, this goes back to the cultural shift in that we need to encourage people to just start non-corporate businesses, or you could start a
Mm-hmm.
corporation but just never sell shares,
Right.
just never go public and just operate your business.
LLC, like
Well,
yeah.
because there are major corporations that were completely held internally. They didn't sell stock, and they were actually pretty banging, pretty damn awesome. And
Oh
it
yeah.
was until they went public that everything just fucking fell apart and it got all
Yep.
stupid. Like, well, you can see it over and over and over again. And companies
Mm-hmm.
that were rocking and rolling that went bankrupt after they went public, that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, it's not good. It's not good for the public. Certainly not good for the people that work at the companies. Imagine if you've been working at a company for like 20, 30 years and they made some dumbass decision that made the company go tits up and now you're out of a job. It's like, oh, well, that sucks, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
even the people lower down, like just the boots on the ground people, it's like, hey, I liked this job and now it's gone. They're closing all the stores. I enjoyed working here and stuff. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like companies ought to go out of business because they suck. That's the, you know, like, well, and even we saw it during like 2008, that time period, like all these banks being bailed out. We saw like the automotive industry being bailed out. Like, no, y'all put yourself in this position. You did a
Yeah.
dumb, and now you're going to suffer the consequences. You're going out of business, and somebody else who has actual good ideas is going to come and take your place. That's how it is. It's how it should be. Like,
Yeah.
you can't, no, just because you can lobby the federal government to give you free money, basically. No, 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 no. Because I can't do that. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, it's I mean, tons of people point this out, but it's interesting that socialism is totally fine for corporations, but when it comes to people wanting help, oh, that's communism.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's why I say the US is a corporatocracy because they're basically interlinked.
Hmm.
The major corporations, all like the banking system, and the government, they're all in bed together. Like it's a big
Totally.
old three-way, going on. and
Hmm.
and that's a problem, and because it only benefits the government, the banking system, and the major corporations. It doesn't benefit us
Well, it's
at
not a
all.
three-way. We're not in the bed.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. We're
Exactly.
just a cuck in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
chair in the
Just
corner,
sitting there with the video camera recording. Yeah, crying, masturbating. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, and that's like, these things can change with a cultural shift where
Hmm.
enough people start to take on the attitude of wanting it to be different. That's required because essentially you're up against so many people who are perfectly fine with the status quo. um it's the fucking boomers and stuff when it comes to zoning, right? All too often, because cities have talked, Tacoma actually sort of did this, like getting rid of zoning. um and and like, of course, everybody who already owns their house as much as possible, it's all paid off and stuff, they want their stuff to go up, so they don't want like cheaper housing coming in and lowering the property price, and like, multi-story apartment complexes and stuff. They're like, no, 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 I want it the same. No, fuck you. You can deal with it. It'll go up, it'll go down, you still own your house. but you're not
Yeah.
entitled to an ever increasing bottom line. That's not,
Right.
you don't get that, because it is actually harming the people who want to come in, beginners, right? Remember when back in the day when we were teenagers and 20 somethings and stuff, in Tacoma, there were starter homes, right? All over the place.
Yeah.
Like the sub $100,000 properties, sometimes maybe in Hilltop, maybe in like a rougher area, but it's like, yeah, you could be working a pretty menial job, making very little, and maybe even with a friend or something, buy a house. You could buy a
Yeah.
house and then take that. Once you pay it off, now you have that as leverage to put in to buy a bigger house and start a family and stuff. And there's no
When we were
starter houses here.
roommates and I had
Yeah.
a part-time cooking job,
Yeah.
I got approved for $100,000 loan that would have got me at least a condominium
Yeah. Oh
with
yeah.
a part-time cooking job
Mm-hmm.
in, like 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Like,
I know. Well, actually, if you had 100K though, there were properties in the east side where you could buy a whole house. Like
yeah,
it would be doable.
yeah.
And like imagine if you'd done that. I mean, I thought about doing that
At the
too.
time, I probably thought that was a shitty idea, but then,
Mhm.
like there's been a lot of work to, you know, uh, gentrify the east side
Mhm.
of Tacoma, and so it
Well,
actually
and
probably would have been a really good economical choice.
and it's kind of auto gentrifying because the prices are so fucking high now that only
Yeah,
people of means can afford to buy. Like the lowest price houses around here are like $300,000 for a one bedroom house. Like
right.
that's a starter house. What? How the hell? There's no way
Well,
anybody can afford that.
and the other crazy thing about that is that one, even two-bedroom houses in Tacoma are super rare
Mm-hmm.
because when they were all built, three-bedroom houses were like dirt cheap.
Yeah.
And so like most of them are three-bedroom houses, which are now like $750,000 in the ghetto
Well,
or
and there's an
something,
incentive too that's artificial, to like zoning, for instance, only single family properties in certain areas. So
Hmm.
when a house gets torn down and rebuilt, builders have an incentive to like maximize their return because they're like, man, the permits and all the licenses and all the shit and the cost of all the labor and the materials and inspections and everything, it's so
Hmm.
much. I might as well build it as big as possible. And so they do. And then more and
Yeah.
more people coming from the outside with these IT jobs in Seattle and stuff, they buy them up, or companies buy them up. That's a stupid thing too. It's like I don't think I don't like the idea of companies owning a whole bunch of houses and
Yeah.
rental properties and stuff. I don't mind like an individual or a family or whatever. They have like three or four houses, like people we've known have, and they rent them out. That's actually good because where I'm at right now. It's perfect. I have
Yeah.
like an actual rapport with a human being that I can text and stuff, and he'll text me and be like, "Oh yeah, coming by to do something," and 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 like he even when the property tax went up to such a threshold that he was like not making that much money, he like texted me. He's like, "All right, well, property tax, I'm sure you're aware, is really high. What do you think's a fair price to raise it by?" And I did math a little bit more than that hike over that time period, and yeah, so it's like we negotiated that,
Hmm.
and that's a good
That's
thing.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you don't get that with like Park 52 or some of these big ass
Right.
companies that own all the property. No, they're just like they'll just arbitrarily raise the price. Like one day it's like you get used
Yeah.
to your rent being this much, and the next day you get a bill and it's like, oh, it's $200 higher. Oh shit.
I mean, if there weren't shareholders, you could.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing. These companies are
Like that's a
required.
good business practice that would make them like a strong competitor among other businesses
Yeah.
if they did that. But, you know,
Mhm.
the shareholders don't like that. So
Nope. Nope. They don't care. It's all they see is a number because that's all it is.
they're like, oh, we're used to this amount of profit. We would like to keep that amount of profit no
Mhm.
matter what.
And I'll see your profit and I'll raise it by 20%. That's what they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, that's bogus. But like housing, zoning, getting rid of zoning would be awesome. Also, cutting down some of the red tape when it comes to building. Like in Tacoma, you can't build buildings taller than a certain height. I think it's 20 stories or something, and that's only in the commercial area downtown.
Oh, wow.
What if we just said, whatever? Like, you want to build a big
Right.
ass apartment building in an industrial area where the land is cheap? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean,
Imagine how that would change things.
if if there's a nice view, I guess I could see that, but like there are plenty of situations where you're not going to fuck someone's view up.
No,
You
where
know,
your
like
view is basically just
so
the shopping center or something. Yeah.
right. So like yeah, like again, Sim City. I think I
Mhm.
this is the second time in this episode I've mentioned that. But like,
Yeah.
you know, you would have these arcos, right? Like these super
Yeah.
tall buildings that would hold
Mhm.
like 20,000 people in like
Yeah.
a 1 block radius. It's
Yeah.
like, well, fuck yeah, I'm gonna build that.
Well,
Like,
actually, yeah, because what you could do, like in a it's, like, go down to the tide flats in Tacoma, right? There's all this property that it's just vacant, and it has been for years.
yeah,
It's all zoned industrial. Um, why not do that? What you're talking about, build like 100-story
yeah,
building where nobody's going to give a shit. Um, and
right.
you could have a hospital and a clinic. You could have a school in there. You could have shops, all kinds of shit. So it's like,
Restaurants
yeah,
and yeah.
restaurants, all kinds of things in this massive building that would instantly house like a massive proportion of the population. And then, of
Hmm.
course, now, oh, all the houses are vacant. Park 52 can't rent to anybody because they're like, well, I'm living in that place. Why would I spend $2,500 a month for a stupid ass house? So now they have no choice but to lower prices to bring people in. And then prices don't come down enough. Okay, build another one of those 100-story buildings next to the other one and suck
Yeah.
up as many customers as possible. Because it's like there's a lot of people who don't care about living in a house. It's
Hmm.
like, actually, I would love to live in a high-rise apartment building in the tide flats and look at all the cranes and the ships coming through, like, and the
Not have to
trucks
mow your
going.
lawn. Like,
Yeah, yep. That's another, yeah, no maintenance.
yeah.
And not only that, but shared utilities. Like the
Hmm.
utilities in a moderately sized apartment complex are dirt cheap compared to what I pay because it's all shared in one complex. And imagine if it was 100-story building that had 20,000 people living in it. Like your utilities would be like what we paid at Rogers Place. Yeah. Would it pay like $7 a month for cable or something like that? Like, and we didn't even pay for utilities.
Ah, man. There's
How
so many
great is
better
that?
ways to just do life.
Yeah.
And and you know, like we need dangerous playgrounds. We need
We
to
do.
live in a dangerous playground. We need to
Mm-hmm.
try shit. Like,
Yes. And not be afraid of the potential outcomes and not listen to the people who the old guard who are like, oh, well, what about my
well,
property value and stuff like
yeah,
that.
and here's the thing. Like, I really think like there's no right that the government has to say we can't just do this. We can't
Mm-hmm.
like I don't think there's any law on the book that says we can't create our own sovereign government that
Mm-hmm.
operates within, because like we've always heard that like, oh, if you do that, of course you can secede from the union or whatever, but then they're just going to bomb the shit out of you. Well, it's like, well, if it's an AI government and it just kind of exists ethereally everywhere at once, what
Yeah.
are you going to bomb?
Well, and not only
Like,
that, but imagine if you did
what you
build.
going to do about it, punk?
Yeah. Well, imagine if you did build a thriving metropolis with families and businesses and stuff like that, but it's independent. And the government did bomb that. What are the optics of that, man?
Right.
Like that would create riots.
Mm.
People would go ballistic. And this is not the country you want to piss off the people in. I'll say that. Um, and so it like, yeah, I mean, it is in the it's either, I think it's in the Declaration of Independence, that the concept of with the consent of the governed,
Mhm.
and that it's like, well, what happens when people stop consenting? What what then? you know, I'd argue that
Yeah.
it's almost that way as it is because only about half the population votes to begin with, and then only half of that is for like a
Yeah, I mean,
particular
what is the
candidate.
definition of consent?
Yeah, what is it like? What happens when it goes down to like 5,000 people in a country of hundreds of thousands of people, or hundreds of millions of people? I mean, you only have like a little handful of people, and those are the only ones that vote. Does that really count as consent, or do you finally call it and say, yeah, well, I guess that's it?
Right.
Because I mean, it
Yeah.
is trending in that direction. I think everybody's a little bit pissed off about the state of
Well,
things.
yeah. I mean, that's the one thing I've said several times on the show is like people may not agree on things, but one thing or everyone agrees upon is that things are shitty.
Yes, and they could definitely be better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like nobody's really happy
Mhm.
with the way things are.
Yeah, no,
They may
nobody
not
wakes
agree
up in
on
the.
how they should be, but
Mhm.
they all agree that it sucks.
Yep, yep, yeah.
Like
Everybody is.
everyone can agree on that.
Yep,
Everything sucks. Like
yep, and there's
so
we can't just keep
yeah.
doing it the way we've been doing it. That's really what it
Yeah.
comes down to.
That's the
Something has
definition
to
of
change.
insanity.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, have you seen Washington D.C. lately? Or for the last fucking 100 years? Yeah, it's all insanity, man.
I mean it's every year is crazier than the
Yeah,
one
I know.
before it. So
I'm just waiting for like idiocracy to finally fully come to fruition.
oh man, I think that happened like 10 years ago. Like
Well, it has it not as goofy though. Like in fact, that would be kind of
not as
funny.
goofy, but I mean like it's ridiculous.
It is,
It is
yeah.
really ridiculous. Like
Hmm.
I don't know.
Well,
That,
and
like
yeah,
the
that's
whole idea that the Hadron Collider sent us into an alternate universe
mhm.
is actually kind of like pretty plausible, I
I
think.
yeah, that would explain a lot. Or maybe that we're living in a simulation, right?
Yeah, something's not right.
Like the
So,
programmers are like, things are looking all right. Let's see if we change this variable a little and that, and we'll just throw some monkey wrenches in there, and like,
like in the beginning there was a god and then God got bored and just like an extended vacation,
mhm.
never came back. And then
Yeah,
somebody was like, "Ah, we need something to control the universe," and they created a simulation, and then they buggered off, and
yeah.
now we're just stuck in a simulation within a godless universe. Like,
Mhm. Well, it could be, what? Yeah, like you said, what? So like maybe a group of people, really wise individuals, built this simulation, and they're like, this is gonna be the greatest thing to last millions and millions of years, and then they all die. They get some disease and they all die, so nobody's maintaining it. So like the machine, the simulation's running on, it's like sparking and shit's just like breaking down left and right, and that would explain all this weirdness. Like banks of
God's got his
memory
feet
being.
up on the couch smoking a
Yeah,
joint. Like,
yeah,
man, I don't give a shit what happens over there.
yeah.
I didn't make the simulation.
there's like there's like rodents chewing on cabling and stuff like that. There's like nobody keeping it running. Oh man.
Oh God.
Yeah, that's good. I think we've, yeah, a little over an hour and a half there, so I think that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I think we've covered quite a bit,
I've
man.
emptied all my beers. So
Well, then that means the episode is at an end. Probably time to pee too. Hmm.
yeah, probably. Oh wait,
All right.
maybe I already did.
Oh.
Oh wait, I already did that joke.
Yeah, yeah. Joke? What joke?
Joke? Yeah, yeah, it was a joke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right. Hopefully everybody enjoys this one. This is definitely a thought-provoking episode for sure.
Yeah.
Man. And as usual, we covered so many different things. But man,
Well,
yeah,
what should we do next week? Should we rehash the one that didn't air?
maybe. Yeah, I thought about leaving it. I didn't want to redo it again because it was like disappointing. And then
Mm.
I'd be resentful the whole time. Like, God damn it. That was a great one. Yeah,
It
we can think
was.
about it. We'll talk off air, I think, and see. We'll come up
Yeah.
with something. So yeah, hopefully everybody enjoyed this and stick around to next week. We do it again next Sunday, and there's other stuff peppered in the middle, in between days and stuff like that for your enjoyment.